Welcome to Connecting Africa, where we meet the people, projects and companies transforming African business and bringing the continent together. I'm Eleni Jarkas, and this month we are looking at food production and two vital sectors, agriculture and fisheries. Now, agriculture accounts for between 65% and 70% of Africa's workers, making up 30 to 40% of the continent's GDP. The sector possesses immense opportunity. Africa is home to more than 60% of the world's arable land. Despite this, it's underutilized, and Africa needs to start producing more food. In 2022, a fifth of the African population was estimated to be undernourished. The continent's population is growing rapidly, and by 2050, its population is estimated to reach close to 2.5 billion people.
Unfortunately, the crisis that we had after the war in Ukraine show that we still have a lot to do on agriculture production in Africa, because the country finds themselves having a very high inflation. There is scarcity of food, of wheat in the world, and there is scarcity of fertilizer. So all that ramp up the world prices of food, with all the consequences that we saw in African economies. So not enough has been done, and a lot needs to be done to be able to really use the huge potential that the continent has in terms of food production.
In Nigeria, an estimated $10 billion is spent importing food to make up for a gap in local production, according to the International Trade Administration. Now, many are looking to cassava, a root vegetable, to close that gap.
Cassava is one of the most valuable crops that we can grow in Africa.
Just below the soil is a crop deeply rooted in Nigeria's cuisine. Cassava is a root vegetable similar to a potato. It's gluten-free and can be used as a base for many dishes. Its byproducts range from flour to ethanol. The country produces around 60 million tons of cassava a year. Poultry International chose to farm the crop for its versatility.
We are looking at being able to replace everything that corn and wheat can do with cassava.
Located in Oyo State, the company says it produces between 300 to 400 tons of cassava every day during the rainy season between April and October.
We started with 17 farmers. Today we have about 10,000 farmers. We have over 15,000 hectares being cultivated in this community, providing cassava to Sultry and also to other companies that are buying cassava.
While the majority of their products stay within Nigeria, the company is expanding its offerings abroad.
Sultry International presently produces about 4 different products: food-grade starch, high-quality cassava flour, glucose, and sorbitol. Now, these 4 products, we sell about 80% of them in Nigeria today. About 10% of our total production have started to move into the international market.
One of the challenges to breaking this export barrier is the difficulties faced while processing cassava.
The crop is almost 70% water. By the time you harvest it, it starts deteriorating within the next 24 hours, and it goes on and on. So if you do not process it as soon as possible, you'll be losing a lot out of the quality with the other derivatives you'll be getting from it. People do not have the enabling environment, the resources, the capital to set up plants to process these products.
This is why researchers at the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture are working to develop crop varieties.
Nigeria is the largest producer of cassava. However, in terms of yield, we are not even around the top 10. And this is because we are not using the right planting materials. So this is the narrative we are trying to change. We want to change that trajectory. We want farmers to get access to good, healthy planting material of improved varieties. The researchers now, they are breeding or developing varieties that are suited or tailored to meet specific needs.
The CEO of Niji Group says the key to boosting cassava exports within Africa is through mechanization. Along with cultivating its own crops, the company specializes in building equipment to ease cassava processing.
So majorly, what we do at Niji Group is to fabricate equipment and export to different African countries that really want to process cassava produce. So some of the equipment we use in value addition have been designed. I've designed an automated line for flour.
As these farmers ramp up production, they are keen to explore potential opportunities to increase continental trade.
The cassava industry have come to stay. I see it taking its place in taking Nigeria to the next level. If we can take all the potentials that are in this crop and transform it and use it accordingly. The African Free Trade Agreement, I see, have become an encouragement to sultry, as it were, because this has helped us to be able to open our eyes to doing business with Africa, especially because of the export tariff that has been subsidized or removed accordingly. So we are looking at opportunity to, this year, 2024, take advantage of that to move our product to other African countries.
When we come back, we look at new opportunities being explored by South Africa's sugarcane industry. Welcome back to Connecting Africa. I'm Eleni Jarkas. Now, in South Africa, the sugar industry is big business. It employs 85,000 people directly, accounting for more than 11% of workers in the agriculture sector. Indirectly, it employs an estimated 350,000 people, valuing the industry at just over $1 billion annually. But it has been facing difficult headwinds of late. As a result, it has set about diversifying its products with some surprising and exciting results. It's a centuries-old industry. From its humble beginnings in the mid-1800s, today sugarcane is South Africa's second most valuable field crop.
About 1 million households in this country depend on the economic activities of the industry.
But the 2018 introduction of a tax on sugar-sweetened drinks to reduce consumption and address health concerns greatly impacted the industry.
It's eroded 250,000 tons of sugar demand basically in 1 year. And those consequences we are still seeing today. We had huge job losses.
In 2020, the industry started looking at ways to find new sources of income for its farmers.
It was decided that we'd have a master plan to try and make sure that going forward, the industry becomes more sustainable. And one of those objectives was to look at diversification.
There are 150 odd products you can make from sugarcane. Some on a huge scale like bioethanol and others on a very small scale like aspirin. The question is, can you make these in a cost competitive way? And the newer question is, can they be made in a sustainable way?
The Sugar Milling Research Institute in Durban is determined to find answers to these questions.
We are currently developing technologies for sugar processing, but we also do research into the techno-economics of diversification. So that would be about making new products from sugarcane and sugarcane processing streams. South Africa currently exports anywhere between 0 and 50% of our sugar as export sugar. And that theoretically is available as a very high purity feedstock from which we can make other things.
At this distillery just outside of Durban, molasses, a thick syrup extracted from sugarcane, is annually turned into 55 million litres of a biofuel known as bioethanol. 33 million litres is exported to East Africa, where it is used in the manufacture of liquor, according to Edgar Bruggeman of Ilovo Sugar Limited. The rest is sold to local personal care product producers and within the industrial and pharmaceutical sectors. Now, the South African sugar industry is exploring the idea of using sugar to make sustainable jet fuel for the aviation industry.
So the aviation fuel sector is a really interesting one. In order to green the industry, they really need to look at biofuel, and one of the processes that has been approved for sustainable aviation fuel is the ethanol to jet fuel process.
Industry leaders say exploring new markets within the sugarcane industry could become easier with the African Continental Free Trade Agreement.
It creates an opportunity for a well-developed industry like South Africa, once doors for free trade are open, to be able to explore those opportunities in terms of maybe moving our products, and also so that we can help the African continent to collectively contribute to a cleaner environment and the use of clean fuel.
The Africa Free Trade Agreement is trying to create incentives for the continent sugar producers to supply sugar into Africa, to export into regions that are sugar deficit countries like Kenya and Tanzania, rather than send it to the EU or send it through to Asia.
While they are working on diversifying their products, they're also focused on confronting climate change head-on to ensure the industry is set up to sustain a sweeter future.
25-30% of our industry production is exported, and certainly over a period of time that has been sold at below cost. We could do far more with that sugar if we converted it to a diversification opportunity. We could produce ethanol that could be for industrial applications or fuel applications. Clearly, if we can divert that into an energy source that's renewable and sustainable rather than burning coal, it makes a lot of sense to support an industry that's going to be sustainable, renewable in the long term.
When we come back, we look at the growing demand for fish on the continent. Welcome back to Connecting Africa, where we meet the people, projects and companies driving cross-border trade and boosting economic growth. Now, when it comes to food production, fisheries and aquaculture are important sectors as Africa needs to feed its rapidly growing population. As of 2022, the continent caught 7 million metric tons of fish a year. By 2030, it will need to catch 13 million tons per year. By 2050, it'll be almost 19 million tons. And with nearly 19,000 miles or 30,500 kilometers of coastline, it has immense potential and has ambitions to become a global player. Among them is Morocco's King Pelagic Group. It's early morning at the Dakhla fishing port, and vessels from King Pelagic Group's Moroccan fleet are ready to push off in search of the day's catch.
We can secure the work of our employees throughout the season and year-round. Our boats manage to fish almost 320 days a year.
The fishing giant employs about 2,600 people and specializes in processing, freezing, canning, and producing prepared meals and fish oils. The group has acquired 5 refrigerated seawater vessels to better preserve large catches.
We have implemented efficient tools that can help us carry out selective fishing at a rate of 99%. That is to say, we only have 1% of bycatch, meaning we can't put it to good use, but 99% of the fish is used.
This efficiency is vital as the fishing sector makes up 1.5% of Morocco's GDP, according to the World Bank. But the company is casting a wider net and focusing on export potential.
King Pelagic produces around 14 to 15% for the local market, while export represents 85% of the market. King Pelagic exports to 130 countries for a total of 57 customers. On the African continent, we mainly export frozen mackerel and horse mackerel, which are intended for West Africa, mainly to the Ivory Coast, Ghana and Nigeria.
The general manager says so far their numbers are up.
There was a growth of 23% compared to the previous year for exports, with 804,000 tons in Morocco in 2022.
However, they will need to find a way to keep up with Africa's growing demand.
We know that on this continent, there's strong and rapid demographic growth, which generates a high consumption of seafood. We also have the advantage of the rise of the middle class. The middle class has a strong purchasing power that makes it possible to buy more seafood, and in particular, ready-to-eat products from the fish processing sectors.
King Pelagique says it's hopeful with more continental collaboration, the company can reel in a profit while filling that gap.
Our wish is to join the free trade agreements, to have competitive prices and better penetration on the African continent.
From deep-sea fishing to fish farming to meet the continent's growing demand for fish, several countries are turning to aquaculture. Among them is Zambia, which is vying to become one of the largest producers of tilapia in sub-Saharan Africa. Zambia's Lake Kariba. It is among one of Africa's best-known lakes and the world's largest man-made lake by volume. It is also home to a flourishing enterprise.
Yalelo is a fish farm company. We farm fish, which we process and we put on the market within 24 hours.
Seeing a growing demand for fish, Yalelo set up business 12 years ago.
We started off with 2 cages. From those 2 cages, we grew to just under 100 cages. Within this period, we've become the largest tilapia fish farm in sub-Saharan Africa.
At any one time, up to 250,000 freshwater tilapias can be growing in each of these cages.
Initially, we used to grow fish in 6 months, but because of the efficiencies that we've developed over the years and the skills that we've gained, improved our operation from 6 months to 4 months.
Producing fish to mainly meet the demands of the domestic market, Yalelo is increasingly exporting to countries across the continent.
Currently, we are exporting fish to DRC, to South Africa. There is fish which is going to Tanzania, to Malawi. Yalelo has already started looking at diversification in terms of the value chain. Once we specialize in processing the fish, drying it, smoking it, canning it, the export market will be at our feet.
But getting its fresh produce beyond Zambia's borders can create its own set of challenges.
One of the hindrances to trade or restrictions to trade is the high tariffs and unnecessary taxes and bureaucracies in terms of export. When we are dealing with a highly perishable product like fish, we want efficient transportation and processing through no barriers and no borders.
Overcoming these trade restrictions will be key to Yalelo's future growth prospects and its goal of feeding Africa's growing population.
Fish provides the cheapest protein. It is easier to manage. As we increase our production, we will not only be contributing to our own GDP, but we'll be contributing to the reduction of poverty and malnutrition in Zambia and in Africa.
When we come back, we take a look at the investments being made to increase food security across the continent. Welcome back to Connecting Africa. Now, despite having vast agricultural potential, Africa has long been a net importer of its food. It spent $43 billion on imports in 2019, and that number could rise to $110 billion by 2025. But with key strategic investments, Africa could potentially boost its agriculture outputs from $280 billion to $1 trillion annually by 2030. One person who could play a role in making that happen is Makta Diop, who is Managing Director of the International Finance Corporation. It's part of the World Bank Group, and in 2023, it provided a record $43.7 billion to the private sector in developing countries.
We still have a lot to do on agriculture production in Africa, because the country finds themselves having a very high inflation, because they needed to, there is scarcity of food, of wheat in the world, and there is scarcity of fertilizer. So all that ramp up the world prices of food with all the consequences that we saw in African economies. So not enough has been done, and a lot needs to be done to be able to to really use the huge potential that you have highlighted many times that the continent has in terms of food production.
What is it going to take? Is it investment? Is it the private sector coming in?
If there is a sector that needs really a strong collaboration between the public and the private sector, is agriculture. Because a lot of the elements of agriculture often are carried out by the government, being original R&D, being training the farmers and so forth. This can be done by the private sector, but we need to help creating that market so that it grows. We haven't seen enough of it in Africa. We haven't seen enough work done to secure land tenure, to allow investors to put a lot of money in the agriculture sector.
Because you can't get access to land and rights.
So if you don't have access to land, you cannot invest for the long run. The second issue is all the elements which are helping to develop the agriculture sector, which is warehousing, which is logistics, which is road building. All this is missing in the continent, particularly on road construction, rural road, to be able to connect the farmers to the market. And I think that for the element of logistics, the private sector can do it.
So the IFC has launched a global $6 billion food security program. Africa is part of this program. It's got to do with climate change, it's got to do with food insecurity. Tell me about how this pertains to what you're doing on the continent.
So what we're doing is financing banks and give them credit line to invest in the agriculture sector. That's one of the things that we do. We are also looking at direct investment to companies in something that we do in Kenya, in East Africa, that we're investing directly to companies. And third, we are working on the logistic and supply chain of agriculture in the continent.
How close are we to removing all the tariff barriers? I mean, I know that there's a lot of products now that don't have tariffs on them, but then you've got rules of origin issues. There's so much on the policy front. Do we have to wait for policy for it to create a conducive environment?
The Secretariat of the Africa Free Trade Agreement, based in Ghana, has been now having very clear targets. And I participate once a year to a meeting where they report the progress which are made. I think that there are a lot of conventions, agreements that have been signed now on different products continental-wide. And there is now kind of monitoring it to be able to do a little bit of naming and shaming when things are not moving in the right direction. And I think that we need to go through that, a bit of naming and shaming, for people to really realize that we have to move collectively, because when there is a weak link in the process, it affects the overall ability of the continent to respond to those challenges.
And that's it for this month's Connecting Africa. If you want to know more about the subjects we cover on this program, you can check out our website. Until next month, from me, Eleni Jokas, let's keep on connecting.